Hello and welcome to the Autocar Business Changemakers podcast in association with Tomorrow's Journey. I'm Felix Paige, I'm Autocar's news and features editor, and joining me today is Kirby, CEO of Tomorrow's Journey, and Xavier Collins, Vice President of Turo UK. Chris, a fascinating guest for us to have on for our first episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's great. Turo being one of the really established mobility players in London and have been for a long time, so it's going to be really good to get this as a kind of baseline for our discussions through the series. Xavier, I guess you've been doing this for a long time, but give us a bit of intro to yourself and also to Turo if people don't know who they are.
Sure thing. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Awesome to be here on the first one. Very exciting. Yes, I mean, I've been doing Turo for 5 years now in the UK market for my sins. It's been an amazing journey. I mean, Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. So it's basically an app that allows you as a car owner to share out your car when you're not using it and make money through doing it. People often liken it to Airbnb. And as a guest, as someone needing to access a car, it's just a really simple way of booking a car through your phone. You can find a car close to you that's hopefully well priced, and we have like a great selection, all the different kind of vehicles out there. That's been what I've kind of been doing the last 5 years, setting up and launching the business in the UK and expanding into Europe. Before that, I was lucky enough to be at Deliveroo for a couple of years, so joined Deliveroo in the first 30 people back when it was in a small office in Fitzrovia in London, and was able to scale with them. And I've kind of always been involved in startups. When I was at university, I was part of the early team that launched Uber in Australia. So kind of been lucky to work for some category changing companies, but Turo, I have to say, has been the most exciting, rewarding journey today.
Just picking up on something you mentioned in your background there, working with Deliveroo and Uber, it strikes me there probably couldn't be two more relevant companies to what you do now. So what have you taken from them that applies to the Turo business model?
I think that's a great question. I say so the unifying theme is marketplaces. I've always loved marketplace businesses. I think the reason why I love marketplaces is there's something fascinating about creating an idea or creating a model which may already exist in terms of people were already taking taxis or people were already getting takeaways, but it was slightly innovative. It was like a new way of doing it, putting that out into the world, and then watching two random groups of people kind of interacting over it. Like, you're truly changing behavior, and I think it's kind of like running experiments in a way. Like, it's just fascinating. It's fascinating to see human behavior change. And I think that's what I love about marketplace businesses. You're really just connecting people in like a new medium. And so, I think a lot of the things I learned through watching at Uber and I think doing at Deliveroo, but I guess in more of a driving seat at Turo has been, it's a lot of pattern recognition. It's a lot of the same stuff when you're launching a marketplace. Like, I mean, to give you some kind of concrete, easy examples, the first thing is when you first launch a market, supply really matters. So in the context of Uber, that means having drivers. In the context of Deliveroo, it means really good restaurants. And in the context of Turo, it means really good hosts. So car owners who are putting their cars on the platform. And so it's not just supply, it's about quality supply. Because quality supply is always what brings demand. And so what that basically means in Turo's context, the learning we took is, okay, how do we build quality supply early? And really that means giving car owners like a really good reason to try this product out, investing in things like professional photography in the early days. Airbnb did the exact same thing, and making sure that the first time people come to the app, particularly something like car sharing, which is a relatively, new idea and quite strange for people, we want them to have an amazing experience. We want them to see an awesome selection of cars. We want them to know that the owners on the platform have been vetted, have been coached, they know how to give a good experience. And so, yeah, I think that is just that's something I've learned through those businesses that kind of we translated into how we launched the UK market here, which was, focus on high quality suppliers. One of the first things you do.
Yeah, fascinating. And I think you must have seen some real change in that 5-year period with the pandemic coming right in the middle. I guess. So you'd have had some of those early launches building, I guess, some real change in the supply and demand through that time, but then also maybe people rethinking their relationship with cars post-pandemic. So, I mean, how's that journey been for Turo?
Yeah, it's been yesterday, today's, and tomorrow's journey. I think it's been one of the most challenging, intense chapters of recent history to launch a travel mobility business, as you would know, and I think it's made us so much stronger as a company. It's really like given us huge focus on like what matters. To give you a sense, we launched, before the pandemic, we were the fastest growing market ever for Turo. So Turo operates predominantly in the US. The US is our kind of home market. We've been around for 11 years now. We're also in Canada. We're also in Australia, and we just acquired a business in France. But when we launched the UK, we kind of exploded out of the gate. And London became, a really, really major market for us very, very quickly. And then the pandemic hit, and, we kind of had these rolling lockdowns. And you can imagine that was extremely challenging because, I remember overnight the business just shrunk by 80%, and that was challenging, not only from like a commercial level, but obviously from like a human level. I think going through that crucible really improved us as a team, and like actually like as I said, like allowed us to focus on what matters. I think a couple of things have like come off the back of it that have like fundamentally changed the way society's operating, and have created, actually, despite the headwinds that were those kind of 2 years, have created like long-term tailwinds that are really supporting the business. So, some examples of the things that have kind of come off the back of COVID that I think are, hopefully here to stay. There's a renewed passion for and focus on travel. There's a real kind of relishing of experiences, which I think Turo plays into a lot. It's all about how can we give people access to an amazing experience. If you want to drive in Scotland, you can get a Land Rover Defender. If you want to, zip around London, you can get like a Porsche, or you can get a new EV, or like a Prius, or whatever it is that you need for that experience. We want to be able to facilitate. We want to be able to facilitate it everywhere in the world eventually. So that's been like a big kind of macro trend for us, that the kind of re-emergence of travel. And then obviously one of the things that's come off the back of COVID and like, as we've kind of gone into this next chapter of history is, people are really struggling with the cost of living. I think that's a big thing. I'll park that just for a second. And then the other one is the rise in entrepreneurship. I think COVID gave everyone a real chance to think about what they were doing and like what it is that mattered to them. And we've seen like a bit of we've seen a boom in like the kind of number of, what's what I'm thinking about, like, the kind of entrepreneurial like pursuits that people are starting to pick up on the side or whatever it is. And so those two things have played a massive role in shaping our host community, because people have realized, I can make money sharing out my car. I can offset the cost of car ownership. I can put, £500 a month back into my finances to help start to offset the higher cost of living. And then what's been fascinating is we've seen an absolute boom in what we call power hosts. So people who have actually given up their full-time careers to build a fleet on Turo and actually do it full-time and be their own boss, so to speak. So that's a long answer to it, but a great question, and that's how COVID really shaped
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of fleet operator or power host, as you said, is a really interesting thing. I mean, that was part of the Airbnb transition, I guess. It was started off as people renting rooms in houses to make a bit of extra cash, and then kind of realised actually now become more of a professional kind of host market. And it's interesting to see that change is happening here as well, and maybe links back to your kind of very first point about having the quality supply, because I guess
Totally.
if you've got the fleet owners, and I remember when we first met and we were talking about dealers putting cars on, and you go, the dealers can put 10 cars on, but then you kind of get a professional experience, you get a dealer experience, you go to a dealer to pick it up, or a dealer delivers a car to you, and that becomes more than the kind of real local level thing. So it kind of helps to balance out some of that, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really. I actually I forgot we talked about dealerships, but yeah, that's a really good point. So two things. I think the core of the business is that kind of like human, just like Airbnb, that like human experience led interaction. How can we connect people? In the same way that someone can share out their home, and that creates, the ability for someone to, live in a new city, in a new country. We have so many people interested in booking cars because they want to test drive it, or they're interested in electric vehicles, or whatever it is. And so like there's that real human element to it that doesn't go away. But I think what's been fascinating is on the personal side, seeing people who got into 1 car, 2 cars, starting to realize that I could build a really valuable business here. The thing in the US we've seen is like people building hundreds of car fleets on Turo's platform, and it kind of allows them to align their passion, which is cars, with their way of making money, which is cool. But on the dealership point, it's super interesting, and I think actually to the first question you asked, like what are the kind of parallels between Deliveroo and Turo, I think the dealership side is like a huge opportunity and something we haven't really scratched the surface of yet. But the way I think about Turo's product for a dealership is it's the exact same revolution that would have happened with restaurants and Deliveroo. So if you think about a restaurant, prior to Deliveroo, they had the same kind of space, the same number of covers, the same chefs working the menu, etc. They had all of the operations of the business already running and working. But what Deliveroo came in and did is it basically opened up a whole new customer base, but leveraging their existing assets. And so, overnight, you could basically dramatically increase the revenue that a restaurant was doing by putting a tablet in the site and doing all of the marketing, customer support, facilitation of deliveries, and the restaurant wasn't having to invest in scaling up. Now, what's happened because of the growth of Deliveroo is you've actually got, jobs that are being created in the restaurant industry specifically focused on like managing the tablet, which is amazing to see. But for dealerships, I actually think the exact same thing is possible, which is, a dealership has access to cars, it has, staff working in the site who can provide a great experience, and they have a solid location that's ideally central or like near where people are based. And this is basically a quote unquote tablet. It's actually just an app on their phone, but it will send them customers who are like potentially interested in buying the car anyway. It will handle all of the customer support. It will handle all of the insurance. And so this is a way that for dealerships that have cars sitting there idle that aren't being utilized, or ones that are being utilized for test drives, this is a way for them to sweat those assets and make money without having to invest in any kind of operational scale up, in more staff, etc. So, and we've seen it with I think it was Nissan in the US, where we were able to generate over $1 million of revenue to the Nissan dealerships through sending them customers.
And what does it mean for the OEM who then maybe faces a future where people are test driving their cars, they are bringing their cars back to the dealerships, they're using them for that weekend away that you presented earlier, but then maybe giving the car back, and there's no fixed purchase point then. The dealership has exposed themselves to the customer. Turo has got some fantastic exposure out of that. What does it mean for the OEM, that relationship that you have with them? So
I think there's two ways that it works. One is that I think it involves I personally believe this is going to change the future of mobility, right? And so if I'm in the OEM dealership space, I should be thinking about, given that this is one of the fastest growing companies, in the UK right now and globally, and this is a trend that kind of is demonstrating that it's continuing, how do we leverage this? How do we play into it? And I think there are two very clear paths for that versus resisting it. And I think the first is my understanding with dealerships anyway is that they have a particular fleet that's utilized for test drives, or like a dead fleet or a ghost fleet. I'm not sure what the correct terminology is, but there are cars that actually are ROI negative in terms of like they're not actually generating revenue or cash for that business. Mm-hmm. How do you turn that from an asset? It's just the same argument for everyday Turo hosts in the wild. How do you turn something that's like a pretty bad financial investment into something that pays for itself or actually makes money? So I think that's the first thing is like you can overnight turn on a new revenue stream that could completely alter the business model of OEMs and dealerships actually by playing into the future of mobility trends, which is sharing. But I think on the flip side, and like we have such great evidence of this, Turo's like been an amazing lead generation tool for OEMs and dealerships. I mean, I actually had someone book my car the other day. True story, because they were thinking about buying one. I have a Range Rover Sport, and it happens the whole time, and like particularly in the EV space, to be honest, because I think people like still have a little bit of cautiousness around whether an EV is right for them. And so what we see a lot is people booking an EV, getting an extended test drive, and then going on to buy one. So I actually think that this could, if done correctly, this is me just hypothesizing, it could completely replace the traditional test drive experience.
Yeah, it's fascinating, that kind of whole area, really. I get asked a lot about who's best placed to benefit from mobility change and all those things. And I think people like dealerships and kind of rental businesses, people that have got vehicles, a location and people, staff,
exactly,
are pretty well placed. I think it's an interesting question about the OEMs and how it impacts kind of the market overall, is that I think this will form part of a mobility mix for people, right? It won't stop people buying cars, or people might move from buying to subscribing, but maybe they, instead of buying two, they subscribe one and share one. Maybe they're taking test drives for longer. Maybe there's a bit more of a free-flowing movement of vehicles between customers where they're not stuck in something for 4 or 5 years. And this is a kind of key part to that. So definitely think that's super interesting and how the dealers play. But it's the bit you said about not resisting it. I think one of the key things we're going to keep coming back to, I think, on this is about where do these businesses, the existing businesses, actually start to embrace change versus resist it. I think it's an interesting challenge in this market.
I think the challenging thing, it's a great point. I think the challenging thing that OEMs have, I once read this example of they're basically playing at a casino with 5 different roulette wheels, and one of them is EVs, one of them is autonomous, one of them is like sharing. It's like, where do you put your money? And the challenge is that like a lot of them are trying to like place bets everywhere and not go fully in on either. I think EVs have ultimately kind of won the day in terms of like the near term investment. But I think I think there's a very interesting concept of like, will OEMs start to build vehicles with sharing in mind? Can they actually start to manufacture cars that are purpose built for sharing? Because if you can reframe the concept of ownership and therefore reduce the perceived cost of that asset, it should increase your sales.
Absolutely. They should lead to each other. I don't think you're going to find a kind of notable cannibalization of sales. If anything, particularly the people that embrace it first are more likely to see an uptick in these things, because, as you say, it will get more bums on seats, it will get people in the vehicles, and then maybe it's a bit more of a case of getting them into the right type of vehicle as well. I think I think also the changing model within dealerships, without wanting to go down agency model tangent, really, 'cause it's not a discussion for this, but it is difficult at the minute, because an OEM will have 150 dealers, of which they'll be owned by 50 different companies, and getting everybody to do the same thing.
So hard,
When the OEM owns the fleet, they can go, hey, actually, look, we're going to partner with Turo, we're going to do something something on test drives directly, and we're going to sell directly and subscribe, and it's easier to make that operation because it's under a single thing.
That's really interesting you say that, because another opportunity that you did mention briefly but that I really picked up on was that you can expose people to life with an EV, for example, that's very low pressure for the end user.
Exactly.
Because they could spend a weekend with an EV with a range of 150 miles, and they can then see if that works for them. They've not got the pressure of going to the dealer and returning it at a fixed point, making a decision right there and then, do I put the money down? And they can experiment with multiple cars, with multiple ranges over multiple weekends, or even in the week to test the commute. So are you finding that a lot of people are using Turo for that exposure, for that experimentation?
Totally. It's fascinating. I mean, the people use it. I think that's where I really see the kind of game changing potential of this business. That's a use case within a use case.
Yeah.
But actually, this is about providing people access to vehicles in a new way. And to the OEM point, I think is what I just add to it is ultimately at the highest of levels, you want to be going where the people are going. So, if you've got one of the fastest growing new ideas, and it's not even a new idea, it's been around. I mean, Turo's been around for a long time. It's a very hard business to scale. It's taken a long time. It's been around a similar amount of time to Airbnb, but has reached hundreds of thousands of cars on the platform now, and millions of trip days, and the rate of growth and the kind of like the time in market point to something very clear, which is that this is a changing behavior pattern, and it's kind of where people are going. And so if you're an OEM, I think that counts for a lot. You should be, if I was in an OEM's, Sam, I'm not just saying this as someone who from Turo, but I mean just kind of honestly, I think I'd be looking at like, well, what are the future ways in which people are using cars, and what's the data saying? And if and this is just one particular thing, by the way, there's like lots of different ways, lots of different interesting businesses doing stuff in mobility, but I'd be thinking about it in terms of, well, if sharing has now got like demonstrated traction and fast growth, that's something we should be thinking about as like a future opportunity.
Yeah, I think also the bit about the marketplace in that as well, because we definitely see OEMs looking at sharing models across the suite. We work with a couple doing small scale pilots. The problem, I think, when any of these mobility models are kind of OEM specific, they kind of close themselves off. And I guess when you're saying it's difficult to scale, you guys are agnostic of brand, agnostic of age of car. But even then, it's difficult to get critical mass outside of kind of key hubs. So I think that there's that kind of inherent benefit of working with a marketplace like Turo, where you can, I guess, expose the vehicles to a much wider audience, rather than saying, well, I'm going to start Audi sharing from my dealers, but you have to promote that as like a single thing, and you've got 200 locations nationally, but only 1,000 vehicles. It makes it quite limited.
So the secret sauce to Turo, like one of the most fundamental reasons for our success, is selection, like without doubt. And to the first question, it's the exact same thing. It was the exact same thing with Deliveroo, actually. Like in the early days of Deliveroo, the success really came from the fact that you could get Nando's delivered, you could get GBK, and I remember when we first signed up Wagamama, and it just went crazy. And it was just like the most first obvious example in my life of how selection, giving people, options that they care about, just drives this conversion flywheel, and it is so fundamentally true of Turo. Like I cannot stress to you enough that the thing that really underpins our success is the fact that when you open the app, whether it's like in LA or in London, you can see a selection of different types of makes and models at different price points. So you can get something from like £20 a day, £30 a day, to like £500 a day. But you can filter by like convertible, by EV, by make model. And, it could be the case that actually like people just want a Prius to go around London for a couple of hours. But what brings them to the app and what gets people to talk about it is the fact that you can rent a Mustang, or you can rent a Tesla, and you can rent, a Tesla for £100 a day.
This is fascinating to me because of the industry that we're in. This is uniting the two concepts of mobility. You've got that freedom to explore, the Ford Mustang, if you like. And then you've got the A to B, I need to do this journey, public transport maybe doesn't quite work for it for whatever reason, I just need a small electric car to get from the station to home.
Exactly, yeah.
From the office to that meeting that I've got. And actually, it's really interesting to hear you speak about how mobility is changing. You're quite well placed to maybe forecast changes that we might expect to see over the coming years. What's the biggest change that you're factoring into your projections?
That's a hard question. I don't think from I guess from what I've seen of people trying to make these predictions, I feel like no one's well placed because how many times you heard that autonomous cars are coming in the next 2-3 years or whatever it is. So I'm loath to fall into the same trap. I think that I can speak within Turo's context, right, versus like the broader market. 'Cause I think this is something that I'm pretty confident will be emerging, because we've also seen it with Airbnb, is the emergence of like longer term bookings. It's like longer duration bookings, sorry. So, Airbnb has seen that trend, particularly with the kind of like change in the way we work now. So, a lot more people are working remotely. There's a lot more flexibility in the kind of working environment. A lot of people have decided to spend more time in different places, and that has had an immediate impact on Airbnb in terms of their mix of trips from the typical like 2 or 3 days away to like the 4-week stay. And if you actually look at Airbnb's website, they're doing a lot to really promote that. I think that just for the pure reason that people are going to be traveling in that way, it will have a flow-on effect to Turo. But I think that there is going to be a potentially like emerging trend in people looking at using services like this, but booking a car for a longer period of time, so a month, 2 months, 3 months, and then changing. But doing it in a way that's more flexible than the current models that actually exist out there. I think so many people have tried to crack that, and I don't necessarily think anyone's really succeeded. So it's definitely something we're looking at and we're interested in. Like, how can we improve the Turo experience and the app and the way that we're pricing to give people that option. I mean, today you can book a car for 30 days, for 60 days, but we're not really set up to satisfy that longer duration trip. And I think that's going to be a growing area, and that's going to change the nature of ownership.
Because that's the key thing for Airbnb, where they made the change in the price point, because it's up to 30 days becomes a addition of the daily price, and then all of a sudden it goes to a different monthly price. And I guess that's the challenge, isn't it? Is if it's 3 months at 100 quid a day for a Tesla, it suddenly looks really expensive. But actually, if for that utilization point for the host, and it's a professional host, I guess in that scenario, it tends to make a bit more sense.
Well, the thing is there's a lot of value. A long duration trip is a really valuable trip, but we just need to carve up the value in a way that it makes sense for everyone. The guest needs to get the benefit of the fact that that's typically a lower risk trip. So if you just think about it from a pure time spent driving perspective, if you've got a car for 30 days, that car's not being driven 100% of the time for 30 days. It's actually stationary a lot of the time. If you're booking a car for 8 hours, you're driving a lot. So there's a reduction in risk. There's huge value for the owner of the car sharing it out, because that's high utilization for them. They're getting they're sweating that asset, they're earning more money, and it's great from a Turo perspective, because that one transaction is worth a lot more to us, right? And so given that there's value on all sides, how do we carve that value up and give it back to the users?
It's going to be really interesting to see how you manage that change in model, because with cars, certain cars, maybe combustion cars specifically, if you're looking at a multi-month loan, you don't want to be in a position where someone says, yes, you can have my car for 3 months, but the MOT is on the 12th if you wouldn't mind running it to the local garage, and it needs an oil change and all that sort of thing.
No, that's a great question. I mean, these are the things we need to, like, as we start thinking about that I mean, I guess I don't want to give the impression that that's like our current primary focus is we've got a lot on our plate. I think with the existing use cases that we serve, there's a lot to be done. We really want to grow our network outside of London. We've got some great hosts in Scotland and Manchester. We want to build out that network across the UK and continue to improve selection, improve convenience and all that kind of stuff. But you're 100% right. Like when, as we start to think about how do we serve longer duration trips, things like that, these are exactly the kind of things, exactly what it's like running a startup, as you know. Sometimes you learn through doing. Oh, this could happen. How do we solve for that? And so it's a great point and something we'll definitely have to think about.
Yeah, definitely. It's fascinating. One of the things I was interested in picking up on that you mentioned earlier was about the cost of living. I know you picked up that's one of the key areas, but have you seen that's been kind of a push for both sides of the model? So I guess people wanting to make extra money from the car that's costing them money, maybe on a finance agreement or something they own, but equally people trying to get cheaper access or access the cars more when they need them as opposed to kind of buying or renewing or something. What are you seeing the trends around that for?
So yeah, 100%. Really, really great question. I think so. We've seen it impact both sides of our marketplace. On the demand side, so on like the car booking side for guests, the increase in price in secondhand vehicles that happened over the last couple of years, the unavailability of like vehicles, really drove, and then also quite frankly like the kind of car rental crisis of the last couple of years where car rental prices were just extreme. That really drove mass adoption because people realized, I may not actually need to own a car if I can just access one when I need it. And accessing one when I need it through my phone is cheaper, like saves me money. It's more convenient and it's cheaper than buying one. It's like certainly cheaper than going to like a traditional car rental. So that was like a massive kind of driver of adoption on the guest side. On the owner side, yeah, again, 100%. That was it. That's been a huge thing. I think, I share my car out on Turo. It pays for itself, which is pretty cool. I share it out on average like 8 to 10 days a month. It's actually, I said to you guys before I came in, I was going out this weekend, which I'm actually quite devastated about because it's a bank holiday here in the UK, and I wanted to use it, but had to be a good host, quality supply. I think just from a personal perspective, it's awesome that through sharing my car out, just over a week a month, I pay for it. Yeah. And I think that a lot of people when they first hear the idea of Turo, they think this is a bit strange. I would never give my car keys to a stranger, but then they ask, how does insurance work? And then, to answer it, the trip is fully covered by Turo and our insurance partners from the start to the end. And so once they realize that they can do it in like a de-risked way, and they realize that they can actually make really good money from it, I think the average earnings is about £400 a month. Wow. They give it a go. And then once they give it a go, some of them buy another car and go from there, or they just do what I do and kind of leave it at one, but consider their car as like a cost neutral asset.
Yeah, I imagine that's a challenge quite a bit. Again, I remember in our early days talking about just generally sharing of vehicles and more flexible access, and that was particularly within the automotive industry. People go, well, I don't want to share my car out, but actually I guess it's a thing that's becoming more common, and maybe it's a thing that those types of people they use the service first and then go, hang on, this is all right, and I didn't trash the car when I used it, so maybe it's a thing. So
it's funny, when I called my dad when I was leaving Deliveroo to say I'd accepted this job at this business, and I described what it did, and he was like, you're insane. He's like, no one's ever going to do that. Yeah. That's crazy.
That's really interesting because your dad has predicted my next question, really, which is why has Turo made such a success of this? Because OEMs have dabbled in car sharing, are still exploring avenues in that sphere. Turo's business model is unique in various ways, but why do you think it's captured the imagination of the market?
I think selection is like giving that breadth of selection at good prices is fundamental. That's ultimately what it always comes down to is can you provide an amazing service that's convenient, well priced, and gives people selection, gives people a choice. If you can solve that problem, that's the first part of the equation. Like, can you solve that problem? And the answer is you can. Not easily. It takes time. We've been in the UK for 5 years now, and we've grown significantly. Obviously, we had a challenging period during COVID, but we've reached kind of critical mass, thousands of owners, renting out their cars. But we got there through focusing on that, solving those problems for guests, and taking our time and being kind of relentless in that pursuit of quality. That's stage one, and then stage two is, can you solve a problem for owners, and how do you communicate that solution clearly? And so, the solution for owners is this is a kind of risk-free way to monetize an asset that's sitting there idle 95% of the time. So in like plain language, you buy a car, you rarely drive it. It sits there on your driveway and it's costing you money. This is a way that you can put it on a platform, make money from it, and be covered by the insurance product of that business. And so through time and like just solving that problem and communicating it clearly, you start to change behavior, and then the flywheel starts turning. But it's I don't think it's like anything. I think it's literally just kind of relentless focus and optimism that you will eventually change the behavior. That's how we got here. But still a long way to go.
Optimism is the key focus of any startup person.
Particularly if you're dealing with the UK insurance market.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do you find a bit just in terms of that kind of adoption and growth, a bit about the demographic as well? Because I'm thinking, you mentioned about your dad, I'm thinking about the auto market people that have kind of said to me about this, and usually kind of the senior exec, older generation of, but is there a real, I imagine you've got a real age range, but is there a real, do you notice the adoption coming from a younger audience for this?
I think like most kind of software products, you obviously got your early adopters, which typically will be, a bit younger, used to using their phones, kind of prioritize convenience and technology. We've definitely moved mass market, which has been one of the coolest things to see. I mean, we do these host community events where we get our hosts together in a room, and we do power host, kind of. So we have a category of host, so car owners who are like deeply embedded in, like kind of like the Airbnb super hosts. Same kind of thing. We'll do like these round tables where they'll meet with some of the team and give feedback on how they're enjoying, if they're enjoying or not enjoying the product, what do we need to work on, etc. And we get hundreds of people come to these events. It's so cool, and the like diversity of people that do car sharing, it's just like truly amazing. We have, and that's on the host side. Then on the guest side, we've got people. There's 70-year-olds renting cars on Turo, and there's 25-year-olds. Obviously there's that early adopter mix that we really started with, but it definitely has broadened out. I think the thing that always, the kind of penny drop moment for people, like particularly like my dad's generation, and I think I maybe even used this argument with him in the early days, was you have no problem with a stranger staying in your home. Like, if you actually think about that, it's kind of weird. Like it's weirder to give a stranger access to your house than your car. I mean, it depends. You obviously have some car enthusiasts where their car is sacred. I mean, probably we may never convert those people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I just quick anecdote. I've been talking for ages, but one quick anecdote that just reminded me of it. When I was at Uber back in the day, this was when Uber was called Uber Rent. It wasn't even called Uber, and how it worked was it was a way of just booking taxis. And I'll never forget, it was the night before UberX launched, and UberX is what Uber is today. And I was like an intern. I didn't know what I was doing. I was kind of there to hand out the flyers. But I remember talking to the head of APAC and asking, like, what is UberX? And he said, well, it's this idea that anyone can take you somewhere in their car. And I was like, that is ridiculous. That's crazy. That's never going to work. I was like, wait, what? That's what's launching tomorrow? I was like, that doesn't make any... people would never do that. That's ridiculous. And then he's like, well, what do you think a taxi is? Yeah. And it was just this crazy penny drop moment where I was... a light bulb moment. And I was like, wow, that's... And so now I seek out companies like that. I think companies that sound like a crazy idea at first actually have the potential to change the world. And I think when my dad reacted like that, it was just like, it made me laugh. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, there's a real opportunity here.
Yeah. It's frustrating for me, really, because I'm going back in my head thinking of all the cars I've sold that I maybe could have justified keeping if I'd put them on Turo.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not too late.
But then I am quite particular about my cars, so
that's the thing.
I'd be one of these people.
We actually. I mean, it's funny you say that, because we have a lot of car enthusiasts, not only as guests but as hosts. People who are truly passionate about cars. They love Turo, and even as a host, because obviously if you've got like your one pride and joy that you just don't want anyone else to go in, this is not going to change that calculation, because you're not trying to offset the cost of owning that car. It's a sunk cost. It's like it's a piece of art. Mm-hmm. But if you're really, really passionate about cars and you want to collect lots of different types of cars, this is an amazing way to build, and you're interested in like the mechanics of cars, or you've got like a great network in the car industry. You can build a really valuable business on this platform, and it's a way of combining a passion for cars and a collection of cars with a revenue stream. And so actually, like, particularly in the US, we've got like a ton of car enthusiasts. And I think in the US in particular, because we've been around a bit longer, we have a lot more scale. We actually have even greater selection. So we've got like classic cars and some ridiculous Lamborghinis, etc. on the platform in the US. But those people love it. They get to have like a fleet of Lamborghinis and Ferraris and also rent them out.
Yeah, to cover some of the costs.
Yeah,
it's pretty enticing.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, thank you very much for coming in. Thank you very much for giving us some insight into what you're doing. I can't wait to see where it goes next. I think what you've told us is hugely exciting for the end user, for the car owner, perhaps for the dealer as well. I mean, there are some avenues here that maybe we hadn't considered before. So thank you for giving us that insight. Closing thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, just echoing that, really. I think it's been fascinating to see the journey. So since we first met pre-pandemic, moving through, as you say, the headwind times and now into some tailwind times. I think definitely a key part of the mix as the market's going to change, I think. So it's great, and great to have you on first episode. It's a good benchmark for everyone else to follow.
Hey, thank you so much. Really enjoyed it. Massively appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for coming in, and thank you to you for listening and watching. You can find this podcast wherever you get your favourite podcasts, Spotify, Apple Music and the rest. And you can find out more information on every guest we have at tomorrowsjourney.co.uk. Thank you very much.